All right. Hey there, folks. Welcome back and Happy New Year. It's been a while since we caught up, but I'm excited to bring our virtual book tour back to you on Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster Season 9, if you can believe it, intriguing interviews with creative minds. Now, I know a lot of you out there are like me and just love us some Star Trek, but it's not just Star Trek itself, but it's also the spirit of Star Trek that we're drawn to. So, by Grabarth's Hammer, by the Sons of Worvon, tonight's theme is Never Surrender, the best of non-Trek, including the Orville and Galaxy Quest, where we'll be asking and answering the age-old question I know has been on all your minds: how much Trek could a non-Trek trek if a non-Trek could Trek? So, and on our panel tonight is a writer of stuff, master of forms, and my pal, KEITH R.A. DECANDIDO. When he's not breaking boards with his head, KEITH has written more than 50 novels, 100 short stories, dozens of comic books, and various genre fiction reviews. Welcome back, KEITH.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever actually broken a board with my head, but
Don't break it. Come on. All right. Also on our panel is short story maestro and my delightfully ghoulish writing partner in crime, Hildy Silverman, the former longtime editor of Space and Time magazine. Hildy is also a member of Crazy 8 Press, who does her darn best to keep the rest of the inmates behaved. And let me tell you, it ain't easy. Welcome back, Hildy.
Thank you so much, Russ. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's not easy, but it's a lot of fun.
Okay. And rounding out our panel tonight is horror writer and editor Gary Frank. In addition to writing several novels and short stories, Gary is co-editor of Dark Territories, the anthology from the Garden State Horror Writers, and is an associate editor of Space and Time magazine. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Russ. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. It should be a lot of fun.
All right, just a heads up to the folks at home, feel free to send notes or questions during the panel into the chat box, so during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, so before we do our deep dive on the Orville and Galaxy Quest, since we're looking at some non-Trek-like Trek, I think we need to define really kind of what we mean. So when it comes to the spirit of Star Trek, what does that mean to you? We'll start with our Star Trek expert, KEITH. What do you got for us?
I think the thing that makes Star Trek what it is, and particularly unique in the science fiction and especially the space opera landscape, is that it always defaults to the compassionate response. There's a line Kirk has in the original series, is that what makes a civilized person is the decision that I will not kill today. And so often on Star Trek in particular, the solution to the problem is not having the biggest gun or throwing the bad guy off the roof or you know, some other violent thing, but showing compassion or showing understanding. Whether it's, you know, helping Baylock after he tried to almost kill you in the Corbomite maneuver, to the Dominion War being won not by military might, but by an act of compassion by Odo, to the burn being solved on Discovery by basically being nice to this, in essence, 100-year-old kid who's been stuck in a holodeck for 100 years. But it's basically it's hopefulness and optimism and compassion. All right. Over cynicism and ugliness and dystopia.
All right, Hildy, what about you? So what for you, what is the spirit of Star Trek that we think that we're going to discuss whether these other two shows and movies sort of embody?
So I agree with KEITH. I would go on to say it's the looking toward a hopeful future, and not necessarily that everything is perfect in the future and everything's wonderful and happy. There's wars, there's strife, there's issues, but that ultimately at the core, humanity has come together and is striving to be better, has succeeded in many ways we haven't now. And it's a hope for the future that by coming together, even with people who are very, very different than us, and in this case, beings that are very, very different from us, we can make everything better. So it's a very positive outlook on the future, ultimately.
All right, right on. And Gary, anything to add?
Yeah, I find that the cultural equality is coming across other cultures and accepting where they're at, finding peace in that, and exploring into the unknown and trying to bring it into being known. Yeah, and everything Hildy and Keith said, of course.
All right. So as a follow-up, and I'm sure you guys have as well, I hear and I read a lot of comments about how the Orville and or Galaxy Quest is more Trek than some of the new Trek. When people say things like that, what's your response to that? And we'll start with Hildy.
Well, I think so. Ultimately, that comes to somebody's opinion. I think there's a lot of really great new actual Star Trek, personally, from the shows. I think the Orville has captured a lot of the magic of the original series, the magic that we experienced, most of us, when we first saw it when we were quite young, and it was, this wide-eyed, ooh, look at the aliens, look at the future. There's excitement, there's thrills, there's emotion, there's all the things that original Star Trek and subsequent series have evoked. I think that's probably what they're saying. Certainly Galaxy Quest was such a grand adventure. You could kind of mentally recast everyone with people from, the original series or even Next Generation, and it would work. Especially if it was the actors playing the characters the same way. So yeah, I think that's it. I think it just really triggered something in people that reminded them of that original first falling in love with Star Trek.
Huh. Keith, what do you think?
My take on this is that neither Galaxy Quest nor the Orville are, real Star Trek in the way they say it. In fact, they are very consciously artificial Star Trek. And I use the adjective artificial rather than fake on purpose, because I don't mean it to be derogatory necessarily. But I mean, in the case of Galaxy Quest, it was very consciously a tribute, mostly to Star Trek, but basically to all the space opera shows. I mean, there's a lot of Battlestar Galactica and Space 1999 and a lot of other shows mixed in, Lost in Space, all mixed in with Star Trek in Galaxy Quest's little stew. And the Orville is very consciously doing. I mean, yeah, Hildy's right in that it evokes a lot of the sense of wonder of the original series, but mostly what they're very consciously doing is recreating Rick Berman era Star Trek. It's doing basically Next Generation and Voyager particularly.
All right, so
that's
still stick with that, because we're gonna dive in now. All right.
Yeah.
So while being a fan of Star Trek is one thing, creating an original storyline, whether it's considered an homage or a spoof or just its own version, requires understanding of what you're basing your new story on. So we're going to start off with the Orville. I think it's fair to say that many Spock-style eyebrows were initially raised when Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane announced that he was doing his own version of Star Trek. So what was your initial reaction to the news that it was Seth MacFarlane who was going to do the Orville? And do you think in total, over the course of the 3 seasons, that he effectively captured sort of the spirit of Star Trek? So what you were going in that direction anyway, Keith, so why don't you keep going?
I mean, it's obvious that MacFarlane and is a fan, and he also got a bunch of people on the show who worked on Star Trek, both on the acting side and on the writing side, and on the directing side for that matter. But he and that fandom is certainly permeating the show. I mean, honestly, the one of my criticisms of the Orville is that there's no actual world building going on there. The Union is basically the Federation without transporters. The setup is the same, the history, the general history of Earth since the present day is more or less the same. So that, I mean, my take on it when I first heard it was, oh, it's going to be Next Generation with fart jokes, and that's certainly how it started. I'd say it got better from there, but my initial impression was that it was going to be pretty much TNG with more scatological humor, which it certainly was at first.
Right. So Gary, what do you think? So you first hear the news, the guy who does Family Guy is doing, and an American Dad is doing a Star Trek type of show, but then he had 3 seasons to kind of do his thing. So what was your gut reaction when you first heard it? And then now that 3 seasons have passed, what's your impression now that the series, it may be over, it may not be, but at the end of 3 seasons, you had 1 impression to start. How does that compare to your impression at the end?
I was kind of concerned it was going to be Family Guy in space. And so I was a bit hesitant to really get into it. And there was some of that early on, and maybe we'll discuss this later, but to me, that scatological humor, that Family Guy humor didn't work because they were talking some serious issues. Even in the first season, they were dealing with cultural issues, current event issues, and that's what I really loved about it. And by the end of it, once they had gotten, there's humor and there's humor. So the interplay of characters brought humor into it without needing the Family Guy kind of humor. And I appreciated that a lot more. And by the end of it, I have to say, it kind of went Kardashian in terms of Deep Space Nine, where it was like almost every episode was the Kaylons are here, and I'm like, I really missed that exploration idea that was the spirit of Star Trek. Not so much the war and the violence and they're going to wipe us out, but just where are those strange new worlds? Pun intended, by the way.
Fair enough. So Hildy, as a follow-up for you. So interestingly, to me at least, is that Star Trek tends to, throughout all the various shows, tends to be a captain driven. And yet you could argue that McFarlane's Ed Mercer is by far the least interesting and impactful character on his own show. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, that is true. And it says, I assume that to a degree is because he's just so darn busy doing everything else that he can only act in a certain number of episodes and for a certain amount of time between Family Guy, American Dad, and now this, and being the showrunner and writers and blah, 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 blah. The man only has so much time. So that said, I kind of appreciate that's a true ensemble show, that any one of the main characters could be said to be the focal point of an episode. They take turns, they all get their chance to shine. Any one of them could take over as the captain, and it would be just fine and dandy. I like Seth MacFarlane. I have no issue with him. I enjoy him. I don't think he is the strongest actor in the cast, and I think he might know that. And maybe that's why he doesn't stay front and center all the time either.
So Keith, so you've certainly studied, let's say, space opera captains, and now we've got Mercer, who almost seems to play second, third, or even fourth fiddle on his own show sometimes. What do you think about that, and how do you think it helps, hinders, or is it net neutral for the show?
Interesting. My take on the Orville, having just finished marathoning the whole show, is that there's too much Ed Mercer on it, really, and that he puts himself front and center more often than he should. And part of that is, and yeah, yes, it is very much an ensemble cast in much the same way the latter era Treks have all been. But Hildy was I'm going to repeat what Hildy said. I'm going to be less nice about it. MacFarlane is by far the worst actor in the ensemble.
Agreed.
Everybody else in that is a better actor than him. And unfortunately, he puts himself in the forefront, I think, far too often. Which is fine. The show, the captain doesn't need to be at the center of every storyline. That was honestly one of the original things with Next Gen, was that it was supposed to be a wider ensemble, and just the sheer awesomeness of Patrick Stewart made Picard more prominent than was originally intended. But no, I think one of the strengths of the show are all the various supporting characters And I think it one of the things the Orville did well was give them all stuff to do and develop them very nicely. And they're all, for the most part, played by really good actors. So.
All right, so we're gonna start getting into some stuff, because the Orville, they got into some real stuff on the show. So Gary, so from Spock to Data to Control, Star Trek has leaned heavily into the Android and AI experience. With the Orville, we have been introduced to Isaac, who got a hell of a storyline, which continually challenged our ideas of who he was and who he should be. So what do you think about Isaac? And also, what do you think about his relationship with Dr. Claire Finn, played by Penny Johnson, who was also on Deep Space Nine?
You know, when I first started watching the Orville, I thought, did they get Brent Spiner to do this? Because the actor sounds remarkably like Brent. I thought the whole storyline with Claire was interesting. And, you know, I watch stuff like that and I think, you know, if I wrote that, would people buy that? Would they be like, okay, that's a little over the edge, this woman falling in love with a faceless robot AI, and you know, the only way she could really see him is in the simulator. I thought it was interesting how his character evolved. I thought one of the most interesting episodes was when the other Kaylon with the emotions, where they tried to give Isaac the emotions, and there was the scene with dinner and they're dancing and he's like, I love you so much, and I thought it was going to go with, you know, and I can't live without you or be without you for 5 minutes, and then they really switched it up by him just having that vague look in his eyes and it's gone. And I thought that was a very fascinating moment to really play on me. Well, he was built by somebody else, so it's not sustainable. But he was okay with that, and she was okay with that. I thought the wedding was a great episode. I thought it was just hilarious when the entirety of the Kaylon fleet shows up, sort of unannounced. But I thought it was interesting how they developed his character, and his quest, and it kind of paralleled Data in the, you know, AI trying to be human and trying to understand. And, you know, even through the third season, some of that, like where he's talking about sexual experiences and how does this work and how does that work, and just kind of fumbling through, and it's like, this is not something you talk about in front of everybody. And he's like, oh, I didn't realize it. You know, it made him more human.
Hildy, what did you think? I mean, not just his relationship with Claire, but kind of the entire arc of Isaac.
Especially in this last season, I thought it was pretty amazing that he starts off basically being driven to suicide, you know, or thinking that the best thing logically would be for him to end, and then ending with marrying Claire, like huge arc, and everything with his interactions with Charlie, which I thought that arc was incredibly well done.
Same here.
She had every reason to absolutely despise him,
Sure.
and his whole race and everything. And that slowly but surely, and it wasn't a one episode, oh, he tried to kill himself, now I'm his friend. No, she stayed very angry at him for a while, and you watched, they hit all the beats that were necessary until at the end, or in the last few episodes, they actually wound up working together and apologizing to each other and having almost, I wouldn't say a friendship, but certainly a strong detente. And I thought that was a really fascinating journey to go on. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I would argue, I mean, just for me personally, I thought that his arc from, you know, he's sort of like the, you know, the lovable robot and you want to like him, and then he turns and he was going to wipe out humanity. Like, that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah.
And then to make us all the way back, I mean, from all the space opera that I've ever seen, I would put that storyline, for me personally, I don't know if it's the #1 storyline for me, but it's got to be probably in my top couple.
It was really well done. And
I think, and I agree with you that the way they took their time and let the beats play out So it wasn't just the, oh, you're a monster. Oh, no. Oh, I see. No, deep down, you're really not a monster. You're a good guy. I love you. She's like, no, you tried to kill everyone I know. So go fuck yourself.
Yep.
So Keith, what do you, I know you're chomping at the bit here. What do you got to say?
Oh, no, I just wanted to add that I thought that Mark Jackson did a superlative job of playing somebody who really was emotionless. It's a really weird thing with a lot of actors, how they approach characters like, you know, android characters, or in Star Trek Vulcan characters who are supposed to have emotional control. For all the Data said he was emotionless, he wasn't.
Right.
I mean, Brent Spiner played him as having at least enough of a personality that there were obviously emotions there. That was a directive from Michael Piller when he came in season 3 that was just dumb. But and with Vulcans, it's more emotional control. So there's still emotions there that poke out, usually in the form of sass. Mark Jackson genuinely played Isaac without emotion.
Yes.
And I didn't realize how good a job he was doing until the episode Gary mentioned, when he got emotion. And just a complete and utter change. And it was especially impressive in the simulator scenes, because then he isn't, you know, it isn't the robot, the faceless robot thing. It's Mark Jackson's actual face. And he did an amazing job.
I agree.
And it was really, and it was fascinating, like you said, watching the development with Charlie, who I wish had been played by a better actor, but with Finn and with Finn's kids too. That all was just really nicely done, and I like the way it developed, and especially the way it ended. And the wedding with all the Kalons standing up in unison and sitting down in unison.
Yeah, that's great. And when we got to see those few moments of Isaac being, you know, in his human form and having that emotion, to me, what made it resonate so much is that of all the scenes he was in over 3 seasons, you get maybe 2 minutes of that. So when he goes back, you know that beating heart it's in there somewhere, but it's not really who he is. So it was really, I thought, wonderful. Okay, so Keith.
That's also why she accepts the marriage proposal.
Yeah. So we're going to get into one of the other really big storylines. I'm going to start with you. So I want to turn our attention to Bortus Clyden in a brilliant turn by Chad Coleman and their child Tapa. Child identity and gender politics and identity has also been a long-standing topic in Star Trek universe, most recently on Discovery with Great Hall. Your mileage may vary, which one you prefer or got more out of it, but talk to me about the lengthy multi-season arc regarding Tapa's fight for gender identity and how that impacted the various characters on the show.
Oh, am I going first? Sorry.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was really well handled. Just in general, I liked what they did with the Moclan society. I thought the reversals toward the end were a little too fast, but in general, in terms of those 3 characters, it worked beautifully. The episode where they decided to do the gender reassignment surgery with the trial was the first episode of the Orville I saw where I was like, oh, okay, this is what the fuss is about. Because up until that point, I was kind of like, this is Star Trek with dick jokes. That episode really sold me on the Orville as an interesting and viable show on its own. Chad Coleman and Peter Macon and the young woman who played Tapa in the 3rd season, whose name I don't remember, all just did a really nice job of showing that really unpleasant family dynamic that came about. That was an incredibly difficult marriage, and it was a very realistic and very unpleasant in the sense that it was still interesting to watch, but it was very complicated.
Sure.
And I thought all of it was handled quite well and skillfully.
Right. So Hildy, follow up there. What were your thoughts about? And there's a lot to unpack in that scenario. So what was your take on it?
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, first of all, I was really surprised in a pleasant way when they picked up the storyline again with Topa and all. I thought we were going to get this one-off with a rather shocking, not happy ending where the child was forcibly converted to male. And I thought that was going to be it. And then we got to see the fallout of the disagreement between the couple, the parents, and that informed their relationship going forward, and all the problems that arose from this simmering resentment Bortus had, and how it affected their relationship going forward. And then we got Topa back again, and we actually got to see Topa take this whole journey. I was fascinated by it. I was very pleasantly surprised and impressed about how it was handled. A lot of it, but I'm a parent of a child who's trans, so a lot of it felt very real and very personal.
For sure.
There were very familiar beats there, especially with the way there were disagreements on how to handle things. All in all, I thought it was beautifully done, very well handled, and I'm frankly very impressed with the writing on that whole storyline.
Yeah, I was too. That was another one where I thought they really just, especially because it was not just multi episodes, but multi seasons. They just, they could have just been like, all right, well, we're gonna do our gender reassignment episode and then move on. But this was a thematic arc throughout the show. All right, so good stuff. So now I want to shift our attention over to Galaxy Quest, which I just rewatched. So Galaxy Quest is a comedic love letter to Star Trek, and in this case, the captain is a central component to the narrative. So Gary, what did you think about Tim Allen's performance as Jay Nesmith, the captain of the NSEA Protector, and how that plays into kind of the spirit of Star Trek?
You know what? I really loved that role for him. I really enjoyed watching him in it, coming out on the stage and being like, I am the show, right? And then Alan Rickman's constant like, oh, here he goes again. But I just thought he portrayed it really well. It was like, in a sense, taking Captain Kirk to like that extreme of being, I am the show. It's all about me. And, everybody else is there. And of course, they love me too. Like, he really had no clue how anyone felt about him, and I thought that made it really interesting and fun to watch how that evolved through the course of the movie.
Keith, so talk to me a little about let's say the Kirkian spoof here.
It was a fun send up of Shatner's own reputation, God knows. But also one of the things I particularly liked, one touch, was that when he was on stage and when he was interacting with the fans 90% of the time, he was on and was always treating the fans well. The only exception is right after the thing in the bathroom where he overhears the guys making fun of him. But aside from that, like when he's on stage, he's in character, he's friendly, he's approachable, he's always willing to answer, the ridiculous questions and and even the other characters are saying, he'd never do that to a fan, and I like that little touch that he understood where his bread was buttered, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. All right. So let's So I want Stace, I want to stick on this. I have a follow-up question for this, right? So he's with the fans, right? So Galaxy Quest both begins and ends with a sci-fi con. All of us here are sci-fi con warriors and members of fandom. So how right or not did Galaxy Quest get that part of it down? So Keith, just keep going. Just finish your thought there.
Nailed it. Absolutely freaking nailed it. To a degree that frightened me in 1999 when I saw it. Mostly because most mainstream portrayals of science fiction conventions were pretty. Think the Shatner sketch and the Get a Life sketch on Saturday Night Live, and you've got a pretty close approximation of the usual. This actually showed the many different aspects of fandom that you see at a convention. That's right. Which was fun to see. I mean, one of the things I love about Galaxy Quest is that it never actually makes fun of the fans.
That's right.
It laughs with them rather than at them.
That's right. That's right.
Which is one of the best things about it. Like what I said about the way Nesmith treated the fans, that's also how the movie treated the fans. The movie is always good to them, and understands their passion and their joy they take in that particular fandom. and even in the fact that they do things like buy the CD-ROMs that have all the specs and diagrams and everything. I actually saw Galaxy Quest in the theater with, among other people, the people at Simon & Schuster Interactive who put together the Star Trek CDs with the diagrams, who were jumping up and down in their seats when they got to the point where they went to see, that's why we make that stuff.
All right, so Hildy, so there's no way to talk, for me anyway, there's no way to talk about Galaxy Quest without honoring the passing of Alan Rickman, who played Alexander Dane, Dr. Lazarus, as the Spock character, and with a hint of Alec Guinness, who famously was frustrated with all the attention that Star Wars brought to his classically trained actor. So talk to me about Rickman's portrayal of Dr. Lazarus, and kind of, you know, and just how that kind of plays into stuff that we've seen play out in real life.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine anyone else playing that character so brilliantly. The dry, sardonic, beaten down, the humor that rose out of that, you know, he was this great Shakespearean actor, or fancied himself that, and he winds up famous for this funny headpiece he has to keep putting on and saying the same catchphrase over and over again, which, you know, I'm sure Leonard Nimoy saying live long and prosper over and over and over again, he probably had a few thoughts about that after a while. I don't know, I never met the man, but I'm assuming. I thought it was just an amazing performance. He was so incredible, Rickman, in anything he played. And he really brought that character to life, and he made that character more than the Spock knockoff. I think he made him very uniquely his own character, his own person, very three-dimensional, especially as the movie went on and you saw what he was willing to do for others, and his relationship with the alien he befriended and then lost. And, you know, again, talking character arcs, his character arc is just fantastic.
All right, so Gary, so as the Thermians show, they based their entire culture and survival on what they thought were historical documents about the true adventures and military tactics on Galaxy Quest, but it also reveals just how, and this is what I thought was interesting to me, but it also reveals just how much the Thermians valued what they saw from Galaxy Quest and their code of ethics, almost like a religion. How does that compare to what real life Star Trek fans, or at least some of them, feel about the aspirational notions of the spirit of Star Trek?
Wow. I think I'm trying to parse your question down to come up with an answer here.
No, we don't parse. We come down to make you think.
Okay. I think if we're talking about the Thermians to fandom, I think that there's a sense of seeing something like Star Trek where we want to take on the best aspects of that and make it ours to make life what it should be. Like, if they can do that, and we're like, they're doing that, we can do that. We can take the best parts of that in this case Galaxy Quest and make it our own. And I think there's a lot of fandom that, and I could be way off the mark, so don't anybody like write me nasty letters after this.
Too late.
I think there's a lot of fandom that would love to see Star Trek, the world of Star Trek, become a reality. You know, we go to these conventions because we love that environment, we love that vibe, and we love what Star Trek represents. So it's very, very close to me. It's very tied together.
So Keith, what about you? What do you think?
I mean, especially given the tenor of the arguments that tend to arise about Star Trek, it certainly feels like a religion sometimes. But the Thermians are kind of, in a lot of ways, the ultimate fan. Not just in the sense that they don't only just build their whole lives around it, but it inspired them to construct all these things, to build the ship, to create all these different bits of technology that they got from the show, which is kind of in a weird sort of way, a parallel to all the people who, like in NASA, who grew up watching Star Trek and then joined NASA because they wanted to be involved in space, because they wanted to, you know, eventually build something like the Enterprise in the future. So I think, you know, in that sense, it's very much an analog, you know, and you know, they're like the most extreme version of cosplayers.
Pretty much. Okay, so just a quick interlude for folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments from me or the panel, send them in the chat box and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, so we're going to jump around a little bit. So Hildy, so Galaxy Quest played with the gender inequality by lampooning the role of Gwen DeMarco had on the fictional series, played with a begrudging wink by all-time sci-fi kick-ass heroine Sigourney Weaver. How did you think they handled that?
Oh, I thought it was handled really, really well. The whole idea of that she was basically known for her bosoms falling out every episode, and you know, the idea of a strong female character was that she could karate chop people. You know, whenever they showed her promotional posters in it, like that ooh, she's tough. But ultimately she was the damsel in distress and just basically there to repeat what the computer said.
She's like, that's my only job, let me do it.
Yes, exactly. I know, I thought it, I mean, let's face it, this, especially the shows it's making fun of, or not making fun of, but paying homage to, but also there was a little making fun of with the way female characters were handled in science fiction. It was pretty spot on. You know, most, especially older science fiction, most women were there to be the eye candy and to be the reason to motivate the captain to save someone or get revenge on someone, and ultimately didn't have much agency or character depth of their own.
So actually, this is just a complete aside, and I didn't notice it I've seen, you know, Galaxy Quest a couple of times over the years. I hadn't seen it in a while, and I didn't realize. So Galaxy Quest was the first appearance of two semi-prominent actors. Who were they?
Justin Long and Rainn Wilson.
And Rainn Wilson. First I was like, is that Dwight?
Really
is that
young.
Dwight? Is that Dwight? Like, whoa, I didn't see that coming.
Apparently he was supposed to have more to do
and
with
was
it,
also
but
Harry Mudd on.
That's right, he was in Discovery.
Was also Harry Mudd on the new shows.
He was.
On Discovery.
Very good. Okay, so all right, so let's do some final takeaways here. Do you consider, and Gary, we're going to start with you. Do you consider the Orville and Galaxy Quest to be lovable in their own way, lovable Star Trek offshoots, or do you think they very solidly live on their own outside of Star Trek?
I think the Orville lives on its own. I think as many little things in the Orville, like the one that I caught was they were going to a planet called Savick 4, I think it was. And I'm like, what? Wait, what?
What?
I think it stands on its own. I think I would be delighted if there was a season 4, because there are so many great storylines just waiting to be explored. And I think it needed Star Trek to be it inspired, but I certainly think it can live on its own going forward, and it does. And Galaxy Quest too. I mean, there's a lot of nods to Star Trek and a lot of nods to the whole convention scene. And I think that if they did a sequel, you wouldn't necessarily have to have Star Trek for a Galaxy Quest sequel. I think they could do it and it would stand on its own as a fun show, as a fun movie to watch, you know, about this spaceship that's out there and all the archetype characters that we see. Like when Hildy was talking about Sigourney Weaver's character, like it's not just a Star Trek thing, it's old science fiction thing. And so, yeah, I think they could both stand on their own quite well.
Keith, what do you think?
I don't think the Orville stands as well on its own, simply because, like I said before, all the world building comes straight out of Star Trek. It doesn't have, I don't think, enough of its own identity, and I kind of wish it did. I wish they had done a little bit more development of to try to make the Union and some of the other things a little more different from the animal, maybe not necessarily have a united Earth, don't have no currency, like all these things that just feel like he just grabbed all the Bible from Trek and just copied it. Having said that, it's still done a good job. The show had 3 good seasons. And like Gary, I wouldn't have any objection to a 4th if for no other reason than there's all sorts of storylines still floating around out there. And it does, and both Galaxy Quest and the Orville do the one thing that Star Trek has always been good at, which is give us characters we actually care about and want to see more of.
Hildy?
So I think the Orville started out, basically humorous Star Trek fan fiction, but it has taken on its own. I think a lot of it has become unique. I agree that they're basically the Federation, and that was sort of the shorthand. They haven't really built that up. They took it, and that's the background. But that said, beyond that, the aliens they've built up, the relationships they've built up, the characters they've built up, I now believe it stands firmly on its own. And I would love to see a 4th season, and maybe they could take some further steps away from Star Trek and really build out their version of the Federation, make it its own thing. Galaxy Quest, I feel like it's, even though with the obvious homages and it's all Star Trek, but it also does stand on its own. I think you can enjoy Galaxy Quest fully, having never seen a single episode of Star Trek.
Yes.
You might not get all the inside jokes, you might not get all the winks and ha-ha, see that, what that is, but it would still be just as enjoyable, just as fun, just as funny, just as good a movie.
All right. Thanks, guys. That was great. But now it's time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories, which I created especially for this panel. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are crew stew, iPhone love connection, monk swap, commuter benefits, marriage counselor, trouble with tribbles, and Omega 13. And as I promised before we came on the air, I have a special, I never do this, never, but I'm doing it for Keith because he's been on the show a bunch of times, and there's one category he's always wanted to get and never had. So I'm skipping the spin and immediately going to Omega 13. In our Galaxy Quest version of Kick 'em in the Junk, if you could unleash the Omega 13 weapon on any person throughout history with no repercussions, who would it be?
Oh, jeez. God, just to go back, but to only go back 13 seconds. I mean, eesh. I'm gonna say, and I can't remember the actual name of the person who did it, which is embarrassing, but the person who shot Martin Luther King.
Fair enough. All right. Very good.
Especially given what week this is.
All right, fair enough. All right, you ready? Okay, Hildy, you're up next. You ready?
All right, spin me.
All right, round and round she goes. Where she stops, nobody knows. And you got, okay, trouble with tribbles. All right. Oh, this is a good one. All right, so Galaxy Quest featured little blue creatures, which turned out to be a rather vicious version of tribbles. How do you think the Enterprise would have handled a ship full of little blue demons?
Rock. I love the little blue demons. Let's see. Well, knowing Kirk, he would have been, exterminate them all. He would set phasers on ultimate, destroy whatever the worst setting could be. Get rid of those things. Get them off my damn ship.
Okay. All right, Gary, you ready? You're up.
Sure.
All right, what do we got for you? All right. And you got the same one. We never duplicate, so we go again. All right, what you got? And you get, there you go. Crew stew. All right, you assemble a new crew of 5 officers to helm a starship. You have to choose from the existing crews of the Orville and Galaxy Quest, and you must pick at least 2 from each, 5 in total.
All right, so we're going Captain Nesmith from Galaxy Quest. Lazarus. Why is her name? The Commander
Kelly.
Kelly. I knew this. So Kelly Bordis
Adrian Palicki's Gary.
and I guess Dr. Claire. Although I did in Galaxy Quest enjoy, what was his officer, guy number 6 or something, or who dies in episode 81.
So my favorite line from Galaxy Quest is, so there's a red thingy heading towards the green thingy.
I think we're the red thingy.
Yeah, I think we're the red thingy. All right.
Oh, my favorite is there air? You don't know.
And I have to admit, I know it's just a sight gag, but when they were piloting the ship out of the space dock, and he's like screeching against the side of it, he's like, all right, sorry, that was great. But now it's time where you're going to pick your poison. I've got 4 choices for you. I'm not going to tell you what's behind each. You've got A, B, C, or D. All right, Hildy, you're up first.
Let's go A.
A. All right, you are going to get some truth serum.
Oh gosh.
I got 10 questions for you. You're going to answer quickly, okay?
Oh, I'm scared. Okay.
All right. Okay. You ready? Favorite flavor ice cream?
Chocolate.
What's one food you will never eat ever for any reason?
Herring.
Okay. Bucket list destination anywhere in the world.
Oh, there's so many. Panic. Easter Island.
Easter Island. Okay. Scariest movie you ever saw?
Alien, the first one.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Flying.
All right. Do you play any musical instruments? And if not, which one if you could?
No, I don't. Guitar.
Okay. All right. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Favorite cocktail? And if you don't drink, your go-to unwind beverage?
Cosmo.
Cosmo. You can see a live performance, sports, music, theater, whatever, any seat, any venue. What's your choice?
Of all time?
Anywhere, anytime, all time, anytime.
Front row center, the Beatles.
Where?
Wembley Stadium.
Okay. And last one. All right, you ready? If you could have one personal do-over in life, what would it be?
I should answer that one.
Come on, we got to hit you with the big one. Come on.
Personal. Dang.
I think she's blushing. She's like, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Regrets. I've had a few. Let's just say not starting my writing career earlier.
Okay, fair enough. I know that's not what you really want to say, but we'll go with that. That's okay.
Go with that.
Okay, we'll go with that one. All right, fair enough. All right, Gary, you're up next. So you got B, C, or D?
Let's go with C.
C. All right, so you got success or bust. Okay, writers often talk about, think about, and are asked about what it means to be successful. But every writer has their own definition of success, which may change at various stages of their writing careers. So given where you are today in your career, what is your current definition of success? And how does that definition compare, if at all, to when you first started writing seriously?
Well, I thought I was going to be like, Stephen King Jr., like everyone does. My idea of success right now is to just get books out into people's hands and have them just escape their life for a little while. I've had people tell me that one of my books, the person was dyslexic, and one of my books got them back into reading again. I mean, that to me is utter success. When you move somebody to that degree and take them out of whatever stuff they're in, just for that short period of time, it's magical.
Awesome. All right, Keith. So you got B or D?
I will go with D for DECANDIDO.
Okay, D. So D is old dog, new tricks. Okay, the saying goes that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, yet every writer I know, including myself, has made numerous mistakes along the way in their writing careers. What's one mistake that hurt like hell at the time, but you learned from and endeavored not to make again?
Falling for the hype in 2011 and Basically, I went with a micro press for a novel that I should have tried to have traditionally published first. It was a novel that I think could have been traditionally published and actually sold really well. Instead, I went with a very, very small press that did very little by way of promotion. They're just not set up for that. Because I thought, hey, all these people are doing, self-publishing and small press publishing and making all this money, and I made dozens of dollars on it. It tanked like a big giant tanking thing, and my first instinct was to try to get it traditionally published, and that's what I should have done first.
Right.
So yeah.
So, but what did you learn from that going forward?
To consider my options better.
Right.
And to not, to make better choices and just think through things, what I want to do with a particular project.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. So we're going to take some questions from the audience. We got lots of comments, but I'm not seeing too many questions. Although here's a little fun one, a little piece of trivia that you may know it. I didn't until recently, so I'll just throw this out here. So who was supposed to be the original director of Galaxy Quest, and who was his choice to play Captain Nesmith? Anyone who knows?
Harold Ramis.
I used to know this. I don't remember.
Yes.
Was supposed to direct.
Yep.
Alec Baldwin was supposed to be Nesmith.
And Kevin Kline.
And Kevin Kline was considered, and there was one other person.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was.
I don't remember either, but anyway, had no idea. Okay. All right, so good. Let me see. This one. Oh, okay, so this came up. We touched on it kind of throughout a little bit, and there's a whole bunch of comments. I just want to go back to Galaxy Quest. To the Orville for a minute. So at the beginning, I think when the Orville was announced, that the fear was, all right, it's really just going to be Family Guy in space. And at least for the first few episodes, that's really exactly what it was. The humor was exactly like that. It was very crude, and not only just, which is one thing, but it was flat too. It just wasn't funny. I mean, if you're going to be crude, at least be funny crude, and it kind of wasn't. And then over time, it's sort of, they pulled back a little bit, but they still kind of have a little bit of like that shock comedy bits throughout the series, even as it became, let's say, more of a classic space opera. Do you think that the humor that they continue to use, let's throw out at least the first half of season 1, and we'll just kind of go forward from there. Do you think that they used humor? Is the use of the humor effective, or was it still kind of like, yeah, I could do without it? Did you like it? What did you think? Hildy.
Oh, me? Okay.
Worked
Okay.
better.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead. Go, Hildy.
Go, Hildy. Okay. I agree with you. The first season, I thought the problem was, we must insert Family Guy joke here. Well, it felt like it had to stick to that formula. Then going forward, and especially in this latest season, it felt like the humor rose more naturally from the situation, from the characters. It didn't feel as forced. Certainly there was less of it, but it was there more in service to the characters and the plot, rather than, we must insert X number of jokes into this episode because that's what is expected.
I have to admit, the one gag, I mean, it was a little outrageous that I did happen to like, is when when Isaac cut off what's his name? He cuts off his leg. They're messing around. He's like, what?
Yeah. That was pretty. Yeah, I did laugh at that. But again, it rose from the character.
I also love.
Yeah.
I loved also the sandwich showing up in the last episode after sending it forward 3 months.
Yes. Oh, that was a good bit.
That was,
Gary, what about you?
That was a very nice touch, and I also liked, thank you, sober male. You may leave now.
Yeah.
I think that, like you said, forgetting the first half of the first season, I really think anytime they went for that humor, it was like the show lost its identity for that moment. Like, you come up with these absolutely incredible social issues, and then there has to be like the stupid humor. Like, take the stupid humor out, get the identity of being a science fiction show that handles these events very well, and go with it. When you stick in this Family Guy humor, it's like, what are you trying to be and to who? You know, the Family Guy fans are not necessarily going to watch a sci-fi show, and serious sci-fi fans probably are not interested in that kind of humor. Maybe they are. I was not. So I'm glad they toned it down and found their identity in a more serious sci-fi show.
All right, we got one audience question, and then we're going to move on. Okay, and we'll start with we'll start back. We'll go with Gary again. Do you think there could be a Galaxy Quest show sequel or TV show at this late date? And would you prefer one over the other?
I think it would be great to see the show Galaxy Quest that all these actors were on. I think that would be wonderful. I mean, your first problem is Dr. Lazarus. You know, when you know you're losing actors, as it were, and I don't know if now it would work because so many years have gone by. And just a quick thing, my son, who's 14, was watching Galaxy Quest with us, and when Dr. Lazarus came on screen, my son's like, "Why does he sound like Snape?" Like he didn't, like Rickman doesn't look like Rickman in Galaxy, so we had to explain, but.
Yes. Why shouldn't he be on the top of Nakatomi Plaza? But okay. All right. All right, folks. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I got some stuff to share here. So just give me 1 minute, and we're going to introduce you to some goodies. I hope. Well, at least I think they're goodies. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to share the old screen-a-rooney, and hopefully I'll do this well. Okay, here we go. Keith, what do we got?
We got Phoenix Precinct, which is the 6th novel in my fantasy police procedural series. It's kind of Law and Order meets Lord of the Rings, or Dungeons and Dragnet, as one reviewer called it. And it's coming out shortly from eSpec Books. If you see us at a convention, you'll be able to get it on your own. It'll actually be published formally, I believe, in May. And the ebook will be available then too.
All right, great. All right, what do we got here? All right, Hildy, what do we got?
We've got Phenomenons, the Season of Darkness. This is the 2nd anthology in the Phenomenon series, edited by Michael Jan Friedman from good old Crazy 8 Press, which would be us, and includes yet another fabulous story by my awesome co-author Russ Colchamiro and myself.
Yes.
Continuation of our story from the 1st anthology. And it was a lot of fun to write, and I hope there's got to be more of these. And this is coming out, I want to say, in February. Am I right, Russ?
I think that's right. So why don't you just give folks a little just what is the Phenomenons, and just give folks a little flavor of what we gave to them. Right.
So, well, this is overall, it's obviously, as you could tell from the cover, they're superheroes. The powers are science-based for the most part. They're not supernatural, so that's an interesting take. It's kind of Russ and my story is a gritty sort of. Actually, this one's kind of horror heavy.
Oh, it's not sort of.
Definitely horror heavy, which I love.
It's horror heavy. I've read it. Yeah,
it is. There's definitely horror there. We got our gritty private eye. We've got her unwilling partner, and the horrible things they uncover that influences the whole universe. Yep, there they are. My character is Penny Trouble, and Russ's character is
Deisha.
And they each have their own powers, and they put them to good use, and sometimes they succeed and sometimes not so much. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, and again, I hope there'll be a 3rd anthology so we can write more of these.
Yeah. Well, all I know is that my only note to Hildy was just be as gross as possible.
And I will say that there was something I wrote in that was so dark that Michael's response was absolutely not.
Yeah, it was. He's like, you know, I was willing to tolerate a lot, but you crossed the line on this one. I ain't doing it.
So I got a hard nope on one thing, but other than that, he let us go 6, so that's good.
And Keith's got a story in this as well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's, my character's in the back end, the one in white on the back of the cover too.
There you go. All right.
Luminosity.
Nasty.
All right. And that'll be out next month. All right. Gary, what do we got?
The Thing in the Woods. It's about 4 adults who go camping and run into everybody's favorite hairy cryptid. It's a novella published by Crossroad Press. It is out now and it's available on Amazon and probably everywhere you can buy books.
Right. All right. And as for me, since the theme of tonight's series, we're really talking about space opera, I'll encourage you to check out mine, Crossline. And the bit is this: it posits that a modern day space pilot is testing out warp thrusters that, if they're successful, will revolutionize space travel as we know it. For reasons that I will not explain, he's forced through a wormhole and ends up on a parallel Earth and lands at a critical juncture at the peak of civilization, where basically their version of Earth has been decimated. There's only 2 sides that are left, the east and the west, kind of the mountainous areas in the city. And this Marcus Powell, turns out he may have actually been destined to be there from the beginning. But meanwhile, back on our side, in the early 1950s, a dead broke, uneducated gas attendant from Nowheresville, Texas, tumbleweeds and all, stumbles into an oil well. He becomes the richest man in the world, and over several decades uses that wealth to finance a private space company that ultimately launches that pilot that we knew from the beginning. And over the course of the novel, you learn how their 2 lives intersect. And Crossline is available in ebook and print from Crazy 8 Press and available on Amazon. Okay, that's our show, everyone. I want to thank Keith and Hildy and Gary for stopping by, and for everyone who's watching at home. And if you want to see me in person, I will be at Farpoint with Keith and Hildy in Hunt Valley, Maryland, February 10th through 12th. No? You're not coming?
No.
Oh, damn it. Well, okay, then not you. Then, well, Keith will be there. All right. And I'll be announcing several other events I'll be attending throughout the year. Until then, I will see you all next week. That's our show. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye now.